Be excited, guys. Tonight, part 2, Investigating Babylon. Let's look at some of the concepts of Babylon. Now, as we talked about previously, we will review scripture, but this, obviously all of it centered around the story of the initial building of the kingdom and the tower, the city of Babylon post-flood, a couple hundred years after the flood of Noah. So all of it's based and centered around scripture. But we have lots of history that was not recorded in the scriptures that give us great indications about that time period, that region, that era, and we're going to be talking about some of those tonight. Genesis 11, 8 through 9. So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of the whole earth. They stopped building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole earth. And from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the whole earth. So guys, this is the scattering that happened with Babylon. They were trying to build this, trying to create their own authority, but the Father did not want them to continue this. So therefore he scattered them, so therefore they stopped building the city. That doesn't mean that they stopped behaving according to the ways of Babylon. And it doesn't mean they stopped building other cities. They just stopped building that city. He thwarted their efforts in that specific region and place. But these people that were spread out, it doesn't say anything about them converting to the ways of Yahweh and coming into repentance. It doesn't say that they stopped their bad behaviors or their religious idolatry or their pursuit for total control and power and authority over themselves. It doesn't say any of that. It just says Father stopped what they were doing in that place, that region, that location, building that city and that tower. So therefore, that people group, now not being able to communicate with each other, spread abroad over the face of the earth, went back to their lands where they originally were pulled from. Because remember, these were people that were pulled together that were already expanding, because this is what the book of Jubilees tells us, right? Chapters 9 and 10, or excuse me, chapters 8 and 9, that Noah had brought forth his sons and his grandsons, and he apportioned huge portions of land to all of them as their inheritance. Those people went out to live and, into those areas to create their families. So therefore, when a centralization of power and peoples became what we are reading in Genesis 11 as ancient Babylon, those peoples were drawn from the areas they had been living for the past few hundred years in order to help build this city and this tower. So now that project has been thwarted and destroyed by the Father, they're going back to their lands, but now they don't speak the same languages. Now they all speak different languages. So therefore you have a different culture that develops for every people group that went back to their different regions they were living in. And that's what we're going to look at, some of those cultures tonight. We're going to look at 3 of them specifically: India, Egypt, and Greece. Let's look at India real quick. Not only do we see common architecture between India, Egypt, and Greece, as well as Mesopotamia, the Middle East, what is modern-day Turkey but was ancient Greece. I mean, you've got pyramids, ziggurats everywhere, especially in Egypt and northern Middle East area, what was nowadays called either Iraq or Syria, Lebanon, Turkey, those places. I mean, there's ancient ziggurats everywhere. So, I mean, we're not even talking about the more later ancient ziggurats that came about in North and South America, but just these from this ancient region from where they were initially dispersed after the project of the Tower of Babel. But India became a unique and vast culture of, not only did they flourish and have a large country to flourish within, but their culture was rich with artistic interpretation of their religious beliefs and of their culture, their artwork. Lots and lots of rich culture, rich artwork. So we see India that has these concepts of, they were still continuing to build towers. They just weren't as big. They still were in this mindset. Like I said, just because they were dispersed from Babylon doesn't mean they stopped practicing the behavior they were doing at Babylon. Just that building project at Babylon was stopped. They just went back to their own homelands and just carried on in their own culture, their own language now. And that's what we're going to dig into a little bit. So they had their own pantheon of gods, just like Egypt and Greece. And all those gods had different names. There was different drama. It was their own left, right wing paradigm. It was their own, internal thing for the people to talk. I mean, they have great vast stories in the Bhagavad Gita and other ancient Sanskrit writings from India, how those gods fought and warred with each other. And they had incredibly strong, powerful weapons that they've made war with each other with. Did you guys know that the idea of reincarnation started in ancient India? And it was actually something that these gods, by the way, this god here, Shiva, that you're looking at, he was supposedly 7 to 8 feet tall. Yeah, I'm going to suggest these gods. And this is consistent with much of the artwork in ancient India, is that these gods that they worship, not only were many of them of the actual Aryan race, but they claimed to be Aryans, but they also were 7, 8 feet tall. So this is where you would naturally, if you understood the Old Testament and understood what's mentioned about the Nephilim post-flood, especially when we dig into Genesis 10, and you line that up with Deuteronomy 2 and 3 and other places, you start to realize, okay, yeah, there was a lot of the proliferation of Nephilim post-flood, of these giants, were happening in many of the cultures. Greece and Egypt are replete with them, as well as India. But these gods had weapons that were always a part of them. This particular one here, this particular god is called Durga. And he is riding an elephant, guys. How big is an elephant? That's not a baby elephant. Yeah, you're right. You're right, Royce. There's nothing new under the sun. This is why we're going to see the commonality between Egypt, India, and Greece as it pertains to them practicing the same things that ancient Babylon was doing. They just took it to their new land, or they took it back to their homelands and carried on with their own distinct culture and language. But I want you guys to take quick notice here. This is Vajra. He was considered the weapon of Lord. Excuse me, I meant to say his name is Indra, not Durga. And he was considered to have this powerful weapon in his hand. It's not in his right hand; it's in his left hand. The one that kind of looks like this. I don't know if you can see that or not. And supposedly it could destroy the enemy in the form of an attacking flying machine. But it also had the ability to cause rain and was a symbol of fertility. The Vajra itself is a thunder of 1,000 blades, is what they called it, forged from iron or gold and mixed with bronze or stone. You guys, the literal word Vajra in ancient Sanskrit means thunder of lightning. What's interesting here is this particular weapon is what was called the Vajra. And this has been found in archaeology all throughout India and many other countries in that region, and even north of that region throughout Asia. There's many, many examples of the Vajra with different styles. Now, this style up here in this picture in the green looks a little bit more than like the picture that we just saw, but there were other artistic styles where it started, the little blossoms, if you will, around the interior blade started to curve around it almost like claws. So it just depends on the style of the Vajra that they've uncovered and dug up. Here's a big one. Do you guys see the people sitting down next to this big Vajra they found? Look at the scope and the size. There's a guy in a pink shirt on the bottom left, and in the back right, there's a guy in a black shirt, and you can see his hair peeking up above the interior opening of that Vajra. This was found in Nepal, in the mountains of Nepal. Big Vajra. This was a powerful weapon, was considered one of the most powerful weapons of the gods in ancient India. And it could control and send an attacking flying machine. We're going to get to that later. In Sanskrit, the Vajra means a thunderbolt or a lightning bolt. Here's a different version. Very artistic, very unique. But there's a reason for it, and we're going to explain. Here's a couple of Vajras that have various designs that are in a museum in India. As you can see, one of them is kind of flat, kind of two-dimensional design, and another one is got more of a three-dimensional shape to it. Lots of different versions of the Vajra. It's not about the design, it's about what it was supposed to have done. Here's another artistic one that was found in Tibet. This one's very ornate. I doubt this one was actually used for war or anything, but very ornate. You guys see the Vajra in his hand? This is ancient Shiva. This is the god Shiva. You got the serpent wrapped around his neck. He's got the half moon, all the symbolism of Isis, of Egypt. He's sitting with the, what does that look like in his hand, guys? Put in the chat if you know what that is in his hand. What do we commonly call that? Exactly, Worspell. This is all the same stuff that they were using. They just brought it back with them. It's the same concepts. This is why we're going to see it in all these different cultures. Yes, they were gigantic. That's right, Royce. This is the Poseidon stick. This is at least what we in our culture have always, like most people that grow up in the United States, they're not introduced to a lot of culture from India through TV, movies, sitcoms, things like that. But we have been indoctrinated with a lot of ancient Greek culture. So Poseidon, one of the ancient Greek gods, had this same stick in his hand. And it's not a coincidence, guys. You guys remember when I just showed you in the museum? Look at the 2D. Look at the two-dimensional flat version of the Vajra. And I tell you, they have different artistic. Yeah, it's the Master Soup. It's the trident. It's the artistic version of a Vajra. This one just has an elongated pole with it. And there's a reason for that. And I'm going to show that here in a minute. Here's another one. Looks like a sai, huh? Looks like from, like a weapon from Japan. It kind of looks like a sai. It's a flattened two-dimensional version. Oh, look, this is from Japan. This is a more traditional looking Vajra from ancient India, but it was from ancient Japan. How interesting is that? Miss Marcia, yes, they did have tech that we don't know have a clue about, and I'm showing it to you on screen right now, and we're going to go into what the tech is about it. Elias, it's possible. I mean, what I'm about to finish explaining for the rest of this, it's very, very possible. So this is from ancient Japan. Does this look familiar, guys? Just in case you want some modern artistic interpretation. Suddenly you wondered why these TIE fighters are shaped so strangely. Just an idea. Just throwing that out there for fun. Just for you Star Wars fans. Oh, but what about you Star Trek fans? You ever wondered why this ridiculous looking Romulan ship was shaped like this? When you're having a battle in the air, just like ancient India talked about the Battle of the Gods. So Lord Indra of ancient India. Yeah, Shannon Lowe, you're right. It's also, they use these in the Stargate movie. I just didn't, I've already have way too many slides for this presentation. I just didn't want to show too many. So I was just trying to show like really, yes, a lot. Stargate like is a really popular movie and the series was popular, but I figured people would recognize Star Wars and Star Trek a little bit more, but you're right. It's in that one too. So again, this was considered to be the most powerful weapon in ancient India among the gods. That it was literally named Thunderbolt or Lightning Bolt, could control the weather, and also could somehow control or send out an attack against you in the form of flying machines. Flying machines. What are we looking at here? You guys know about ancient Vimanas? Anybody heard about ancient Vimanas? You ever read the Bhagavad Gita from ancient India? We're going to go into this in a future episode, okay, guys? I'm just teasing y'all with this right now. We're going to talk all about Vimanas and Hitler's Bell Project and a whole bunch of other stuff when we transition into our present Babylon Present series, right? We're still in Babylon Past series. We're looking at ancient Babylon. But when we transition into present Babylon, we'll talk about it more. You guys see this? Here is a Vajra on top of a bell from ancient India. There's a reason why they put these two together. Look at all these different depictions of a Vajra on top of a bell. They had all these different depictions. Like I said, when we go over Babylon in the present form, we're going to be reviewing the Vajras, the flying machines, the bell projects from Hitler, because Hitler was obsessed with the Aryans who are from ancient India. That's literally where he adopted the swastika. But yet in ancient India, it was supposed to mean peace. But the point is, that's where he adopted his occultic religion, was from ancient India. Let's transition, guys. For the sake of time, we'll go over to Greece. Here in Revelation chapter 2, 12 through 13. Kyle, not only does it look like the Pope's crown, but I almost included a picture in here how it looks just like Queen Elizabeth's crown, too. She's got a Vajra on, and it's a weird crown. It's not the traditional tiara style crown, but it's the other. It's like the dome cap crown, the one that has the purple felt on the inside. It's got the Vajra tendrils that creep up to the top and come to a point at the top. I always wondered what that was, such a weird design for some sort of crown. But yeah, it's just an ancient Vajra. So guys, if you look, and here in Revelation chapter 2, 12 through 13, it says, "And to the angel of the church in Pergamum write this: the one who has a sharp two-edged sword says this: I know where you dwell, where Satan's throne is, and you hold fast my name and did not deny my faith, even the days of Antipas, my witness, my faithful one, who was killed among you, where Satan dwells." In the same verse, guys, he mentions twice that this is where Satan is. Do we take that literally? Remember when Jesus was tempted in Matthew 4 and Luke 4? Satan came up to him. Do we take that literally? Remember in Job chapter 1 and 2 when Satan goes up to heaven with the other angels and presents himself before Yahweh, and Yahweh asks him, "Where you been?" He's like, on the earth, to and fro. Do we take that literally? Do I take Revelation 2, 12 and 13 literally when Jesus is telling John, giving a message through the angel to the church at Pergamum, which is in ancient Greece? It's now modern day Turkey. Telling them this is where Satan's throne is. This is where Satan dwells. I know you're there. I know that they're engaging in persecution against you there. Do we take it literally? So this was the temple of Zeus, also considered Satan's throne, in Pergamum in ancient Greece. Here's supposedly, remnants of one of the temples to Zeus, and supposedly this one is of Pergamum, in Pergamum, of that stone structure I just showed you the drawing of. Here's a replica that they've made and put inside of a museum. The Temple of Zeus. Here's a replica they made for Obama's speech, one of his speeches several years ago. But that's a little here nor there. Let's talk about Zeus. This is ancient Greece. We were talking about ancient Shiva and Lord Indra from ancient India a minute ago, and this powerful weapon they had. Do you guys look at it? Look what's in his hand. Do you guys see what's in his hand? Here's a Vajra. Here it is again. Here he is again with a Vajra in his hand. Guys, but ancient Greece called this his thunderbolt. You guys remember what the word Vajra means in ancient India in Sanskrit? It means thunderbolt. It's the same thing, guys. They're everywhere. Here's a coin from 6th century BC. So it's the thunderbolt, the Vajra on a coin from ancient Greece. Here it is again. Here is a literal coin of Zeus, supposedly, holding a staff with a Vajra on it from ancient Greece. Thunderbolt. Oh, by the way, just for fun, here's Emperor Palpatine with lightning coming from his hands. Remember in the storyline of Star Wars, how he was supposedly the most powerful because lightning could come from his hands? Nobody else could do that. Interesting, huh? Thunderbolts coming from his hands. What about modern incantations like Iron Man? Directly from the palm. Remember the statue, the picture in the statue of Shiva holding the Vajra? He's got the all-seeing eye in his hand. Most of you guys already know that's a huge thing in the occult. That's where the power comes from. And that all-seeing eye is connected to something connected to the Vajra that we're going to study in Egypt. Look at Iron Man. Look at his fingers. Are his fingers the tendrils that stretch out around the blade from the Vajra in a modern day depiction? Possibly. It's interesting, though, that he shoots lightning from his hand. And he shoots a photon blaze or something like that, laser blade blast from his hand. But this is the first Avengers movie that happened in 2012. Now, most of us already know that these are all patterned after ancient Greek gods. So you would have the Hercules character is like the Captain America. I mean, he's literally got, he's got the star of Apollo on his shield. He's got the wings of Nike on his head. You've got literal Thor there, who can shoot lightning from his hand, from his Mjolnir, from his axe. Then you got Iron Man standing there, another incantation. But what happens in this moment in this movie is they actually start getting in a fight. Thor hits him with a lightning bolt from his hammer, but he guards it with his hand, but it doesn't hurt him. In fact, he absorbs it and shoots it back. That's going to matter, guys. That's going to matter. I know you guys might think, well, man, he's just taking pieces of similarity from a modern day movie and trying to apply them. Guys, the symbolism is going to matter because we're actually getting into the tech of what the Vajra could do here in just a minute. I'm just building. I mean, we're only 27 minutes in. I'm just building to explain where this stuff goes, what the ancient people believed about these things, and should we take their beliefs seriously? Let's move into ancient Egypt. You guys see a Vajra anywhere? You guys know who this is in this boat? This is Ra, head god of ancient Egypt, sun god. Serpent wrapped around the sun on top of his head. You got the eye of Ra behind him. You got the Benu, or the, what's it called? The not the ibis, or is it Ibinu or something? The Benu is behind him. That bird supposedly represents resurrection. And then he's fighting a serpent, and he's actually on a boat. Supposedly in this depiction, he's on a boat in the underground river of the earth, and he's fighting a great serpent with this thunderbolt, with this Vajra. Let's look at some actual hieroglyphs from ancient Egypt. You guys see this? I'll make it a little bit bigger for you. Do you guys see what's in his hand? Look what's in Ra's hand. Ra's the hawk-headed figure with the snake wrapped around that sun above his head on the right-hand side. And then in his hand, he's holding this staff. This was the staff of Ra. Yes, Sean, you're right. In ancient Hebrew, Ra is the word for evil or bad. Look at the bottom of his staff, guys. This is the staff of Ra that carried great power, that he could fight other monsters with great power. And it actually helped him control the eye of Ra. That's in the myths. I'm not going to put that on screen because that's actually just in the myths of ancient Egypt. So it's hard to verify, but that's what they claimed. Here's another depiction. We see the staff of Ra being held by this guy on the wall. There's the Vajra at the bottom. Remember, it's various depictions. And you might be saying, well, Sean, that doesn't look like exactly like the other Vajras. It's much more simplistic. Well, I mean, and it's upside down. I thought, but it's his staff, and like the top of it, it's a long staff. It doesn't even look like the trident that much. I'm going to show you guys in just a minute how all this correlates. We're building. Here it is again, with Ra again on a tablet that was found with hieroglyphs on it in ancient Egypt. Here's a Tesla coil in modern day science. This was actually a picture supposedly from approximately the early 1900s. And this was a Tesla coil in one of Nikola Tesla's factories. And the lightning that is coming out around the center rod is coming out in the shape of the Vajra's tentacles, or tendrils, I should say, the shape of like the claw pieces that are coming up around the weapons that we looked at that were recovered from archaeologists. Here's a rod in between the lightning discharge from a Tesla coil coming out just like the shape of a Vajra that we saw in Zeus's hand, that we saw in ancient India in that god Indra, his hand. Here's a double-ended Tesla coil shooting out the same pattern. A double-ended Tesla coil shooting out the same pattern. In case you wondered why the Vajra, there's incantations of the Vajra that were double-ended. And then we see like the staff of Ra or the Poseidon trident that's only one-ended. Here's another picture from this one's actually from 1898. Is Nikola Tesla sitting in his factory, sitting underneath the electrical discharge that's coming out like the Vajra that we saw in the hand of Indra and Zeus. It's Nikola Tesla. If anyone's unfamiliar, this guy was an inventor, an engineer, electrical engineer. And he invented about most of the things that are in your car, transmission, most of the engines, your radiators. He invented a whole bunch of stuff that people never give him credit for. And he's got 300 patents on file in the U.S. Patent Office. And one of the things that he invented was this Tesla coil concept that could actually discharge different voltage, but it was with an alternating current. It wasn't with direct current like we use in our homes today. That was Edison. Edison was working with direct current. Tesla was working with what's called alternating current. So while it can be dangerous in low doses or low voltages, it's not dangerous. And you can touch it. Shooting off plasma discharges in low voltages, you can actually touch it. This is a variant of a Tesla coil in the modern times. Someone made it, looks like in their bedroom or their dorm room, and they can touch the plasma discharge that's coming off of it. Here's another guy with a different form of a Tesla plasma discharge in an outside experiment that is actually touching the plasma discharge and not being electrocuted. This is just science, guys. Here's a lady holding her, what looks like some sort of like lightning, not lightning, but it looks like one of those lights you put up in a garage or a factory or something. And it's attracting the plasma discharge from the big Tesla coil, and it's not hurting her. Oh, hang on, guys. I forgot. Let me look at something real quick. I want to show you guys something really cool. Let me find it real quick. Yeah, there's actually people putting on a demonstration with Tesla coils, and I'm going to find it real quick for you. Sorry. I was, like I said, I had to reboot my computer. Okay, 1 second here. Let me pull this over. Doesn't matter if you can see it or if you can hear it or not. The sound's not important. You guys see this? All right, so there's two people. They built a platform on top of two Tesla coils, and they painted them red and blue. And they have these special suits that they put on in order to, just for layman's terms, to buffer the energy of the Tesla discharges that are coming off of these two Tesla coils they're standing on. These platforms, you see the ladders going up the side of these? These are big Tesla coils they're standing on with ladders going up to the top of them. And they're going to put on a little show once they stand up on top of these, and they actually start the electrical discharge through the Tesla coils coming up through their bodies. You guys ready? You guys see this? Isn't that crazy? Look what's in his hand. Does this look familiar? Looks pretty familiar to me. Pretty interesting, huh? So they actually start fighting, showing you that under the right conditions, with the right instrument in their hand, they're not being hurt. You see that? Guys, they're literally shooting electrical discharge at each other, and it looks like lightning. They're not even being hurt. Now he's just zapping him with it, right? They've got the right tools, the right voltage. You can put on a show. And if the people don't know how you're doing it, they would think these guys are Thor. Yeah, Royce, it does look cool. Yeah, it looks great. It looks fun. But as long as you know what you're doing, like, it's safe because it's safe science. But, you know, if you turned up the voltage, it would be pretty harmful. Their suits couldn't contain it, but they got it at the proper voltage for this demonstration they're doing. But if you had the right tool in your hand and you knew how this stuff worked, because you knew the properties of what a Tesla coil does and how it would discharge energy, and if you could augment or turn up that voltage with the right tool in your hand, suddenly it becomes a weapon, a portable weapon. Why? Because the point of a Tesla coil is that it can actually pull out of the ether, out of the air, it can pull energy. I don't know if many people know this, but this is like in 1895, Tesla used to do experiments in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And one of his famous experiments he did was he was taking one of his Tesla coils and he put it in the ground. And the top of it was supposedly pulling energy out of the air. And then he put a light bulb like 100 yards away in the ground and it lit up the light bulb. So it was pulling energy from the sky and it was conducting that energy through the soil to this light bulb that was just pushed into the dirt, and it turned on the light bulb. He was proving that there is this ether that it runs through all of creation in the sky and in the land. It's being powered by an electromagnetic force, low voltage of alternating current that will not hurt you until it's manipulated in the proper way with the proper tools. So when we have people showing a Tesla coil, this is a large-scale Tesla coil that was in Russia. They don't use it anymore to harvest electricity. Why aren't we using that all across the world? Because Edison won the propaganda battle back in the early 1900s. But that's a whole nother show. Remember these? What does that look like, guys? Does that look familiar? Guys, let's go to Egypt. We've been in Egypt, right? We've been talking about this idea of Ra, his staff. Now look what these are. We talked about these in my Apollyon video. And yes, 711 Lucas, you're right. Yeah, copper is an important part of this. And yes, 5-stone SECC, Tesla coils give free energy. That's right. So the idea is that, by the way, 711 Lucas, those Vajras that we saw and the first pictures, my first slides at the beginning of this broadcast, most of them are made of copper. So what are we looking at here in these hieroglyphs from ancient Egypt? We're looking at little dudes standing next to giants moving this big pillar. And as I show in my Apollyon video, this pillar, guys, was called a Djed, D-J-E-D, a Djed. This is closely associated with Ra and Osiris. Does that look familiar? This is exactly what we saw on one of the bell-shaped Vajras that we just looked at. And we're going to see it further because this is the shape of a Tesla coil. This is a little bit better picture of that interior temple with this hieroglyph on the wall. Now let's look at the staff of Ra being held by ancient rulers. We got Ptah, P-T-A-H. Ptah is on the left. I think it's Pharaoh Amenhotep, I think is who it is, the gold one in the center, and it's also him close up on the right. You guys see this? The staff of Ra with the Vajra at the bottom, Tesla coil at the top. Just in case you want, it's at the Vajra at the bottom, Tesla coil at the top. It's right there in their hands. You guys want to see it more directly implicated with the staff of Ra? Here we have the Ankh, represents resurrection. The Djed, which was supposedly, according to ancient Egypt, this mysterious thing that they referred to as like the backbone of Osiris, because supposedly it's what helped him transition his mortal flesh into immortal flesh. Please go watch my Apollyon video, and I break that down and go into depth about that and why he's the Antichrist that comes back. But then you also have the staff of Ra right next to it with that Vajra at the bottom. Or you just turn it upside down if you're going to use it. All this is connected, guys. Here we have the staff of Ra, the Djed, the Ankh, the serpent on the top. That's why the serpent was always a part of it, and also the sun, half of the sun below, because Ra was the sun god. Here it is, another artifact from ancient Egypt, always together. The Djed, the staff of Ra, and resurrection. So, like I said, tonight, guys, we're just building. We're just building to more concepts. So, ancient India worshiped giant gods, quote unquote, little g gods, giants. that called themselves little g gods. They promised reincarnation to the people after several generations. And originally, reincarnation was just for the Nephilim, which makes perfect sense when you understand who the Nephilim are, the unclean spirit concept, and why they would even hold that belief. As far as who the unclean spirits are that were deceiving these people, as Jubilees chapter 10 explains to us. But then over time, they would start offering the idea of reincarnation to the people, to the regular people who weren't in the ruling class, as a reward for good behavior. So, but it originally came from the Nephilim, these ancient rulers that had come from Babylon. Guys, not everybody was destroyed when Babylon was overthrown. That's why it's called overthrow in the book of Jubilees. The tower itself was overthrown. It was destroyed. The city was abandoned. The whole project, the whole building effort was abandoned because they couldn't communicate with each other anymore. So they just spread out to the different lands, as you read in Genesis 11:8. Some went to the south, to Egypt. Some went to the southeast, over to India. Others went to the northeast, into the Greek area. But they all took the same concepts with them. And I submit to you that they took the same rulers with them. And that those rulers just traveled around. It was a common practice of the fallen angels before the flood in the book of Enoch. They taught mankind the use of antimony, the flattering of the eyelids, makeup, basically. Well, that's why we see all these ancient gods from ancient Greece, from ancient India, and from ancient Egypt all dolled up in makeup. And many of them are transgendered as well. Another common trait within Babylon, both past, present, and future. But this is the same ruling class. This is the theory I'm putting forward, and there's a reason for it. And the same symbols and designs of the ancient powerful weapons we see in modern day movies by people that are making movies and trying to bring a different narrative that is absolutely 100% against the Bible, like the narrative of Star Trek and Star Wars, right? The whole story that's built around that narrative is an influx of New Age ideas and also ancient ideas from ancient Egypt and ancient India, as far as their philosophy and different precepts that are built into the idea of the Jedi Order and the Sith Order and all this different stuff. But then you've got the modern incantations within those artistic depictions, literally of things that we see in hieroglyphs and ancient paintings and ancient pictographs from these ancient cultures about how the gods had this stick of lightning. So I just want to we're building information for these series. Okay. We're going to, I honestly don't know how many series, how many parts of this series it's going to turn into. It may be 7, it may be 8. But the point is, there's a lot to look at when you're talking about what was ancient Babylon, because people say, oh, well, we don't have any record of it. They can't find evidence of where the city was or the tower was. And I'm like, bull, it's all over the place. They're using the same architecture and everywhere, all across all the other continents, all the other places where they went out and scattered out and kept building and kept doing the same behavior with the same power structure, with the same hierarchy of leadership. They just weren't unified anymore. They had their own language, their own culture. They're still doing the same anti-Yahweh behavior. And they're still ruling with power over the people that they rule over. So this particular episode is focusing on one aspect of that power. And how interesting is it that, as we read earlier, that this particular Vajra thunderbolt weapon that they had, not only could it control the weather, but it's also literally called Thunderbolt. And in Zeus's depiction, it's actually shooting lightning from it. But also that it can control flying machines. Like I said, we're going to talk about the Vimanas. I know a lot of people are probably interested in that. We're definitely going to talk about that in upcoming episodes, because that's blends right into the deception of today and what's coming. And it's so ultimately, though, there's an ancient story, there's an ancient legend about Ra in Egyptian writings. And it's that the Eye of Ra, which was symbolized with the little eye that you guys see, the Eye of Ra. It's also, if you look at the one that faces the opposite way, it's supposed to be the Eye of Horus. But the Eye of Ra, the one that has the eyelashes on the left-hand side, the one that we saw in the pictograph behind Ra on the boat earlier, when he was holding that Vajra fighting the snake, that is a depiction of his power, of this all-seeing eye. And supposedly it took on different forms. It wasn't just something that was an eye as a symbol, but supposedly it became an actual animal at times, it became an actual weapon at times, and at other times it was more practical. And we're actually going to talk about that, the Eye of Ra, in the very end of this series. But there's a legend from ancient Egypt about the Eye of Ra and how supposedly he sent it out to punish mankind because of their disobedience at one point, mankind within his control, within his kingdom, and it started killing way too many of them. So it was an actual thing that went out and did his bidding and physically killed people, and then he had to call it back because it was doing too much. I just think it's interesting because I see a lot of unique parallel to this concept in Revelation 13, where the second beast creates this image that is patterned after the first beast, and the breath of life is given to that that image that's been created by the second beast, and then that image goes out and persecutes people, forcing them to worship the first beast or killing them. Because if they're not worshiping the first beast, they're being disobedient. Very interesting. And as I show in my Apollyon video, this Ra character, he would be the synonymous with the Satan character. Same thing with the Zeus character. And so they would have this son, if you will, that took on an apprentice role that became like in ancient Egypt. They talked about Ra and Osiris, that Ra was the sun god, he was the patron god, but then Osiris came up and he was actually engrafted into Ra's authority and power, and as well as the Djed being mixed into somehow making him become immortal. And as a result of that, he was Ra then labeled Osiris the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, but specifically of the underworld. And this is where we see this Apollyon character, who's traced back to Osiris of ancient Egypt, coming out of the pit in Revelation 9, which I've shown in my Apollyon video, that is the Antichrist, that is the beast of Revelation 17:8. So this is why I'm trying to show and bring some perspective and some scope to all this, guys. The Father, through his Son, through an angel, speaks to John in the book of Revelation, gives a message in chapter 2, tells you that at that point in time, he literally says in 2 verses that Satan's throne was in Pergamum, which is in ancient Greece. Physical place. It's a real place. Do we believe that the Nephilim were real or not? Do we believe these stories of that they would have had a leader too? Do we believe the book of Enoch and Jubilees that tells us that the unclean spirits who were called Nephilim before the flood, and then after the flood, they were just disembodied to try to attempt and oppress and attack mankind? And they were the ones that they were considered being worshipped as gods, that were influencing the new Nephilim and the new kings that were being rebellious towards Yahweh after the flood. They were all under the control of Satan, according to the book of Enoch and Jubilees. All of them. And I would posit, according to the book of Revelation, I mean, it even tells you in Revelation 12 and 13, it's Satan who gives his authority and power to the first beast. And that first beast is the one that comes out of the pit, Apollyon. This is the same structure of hierarchy of Zeus and Apollo, Ra and Osiris. I don't know the actual counterpart to Shiva in ancient India, what the god's name was above him. I can't remember it right now, but it's the same concept. They had the same staff of power. You guys remember the concept of holding that staff was mean you rule with power. That was your, we see this same type of language being used of Yeshua, right? That he'll rule with an iron rod. Well, they literally had a copper or iron or wood or stone. They would literally have a Vajra in their hand, the head rulers of these ancient cultures right after the fall of Babylon. They had this literal rod that was a Vajra that has on it the same concepts that we see today. If another one was made, you can conduct power through it. You could literally pull electromagnetic energy out of the air, conduct it into an actual discharge of plasma in a high voltage. You literally have a thunderbolt in your hand.